Welcome back. Here we are again. We're in a mini-series on how to multiply. This is lesson 3, so you'll want to go back and view the previous videos and listen to the previous podcast, at least the last couple. In Matthew 9:38, Jesus said, "Pray ye the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers into his harvest." It's always important to note that we're praying to the Lord of the harvest that he will send, not us. He will call them, not us. And it's his harvest, not ours. We must have specific and constant intercession for laborers, from the one that would do the calling and the sending. Jesus used the laborers brought to him, the ones he chose, the 12 for instance. With them, he developed leaders who would do what he does. Now there's not just him doing the work, but now 13 in harmony doing it. Well, not necessarily harmony in the Gospels, but later on we see them working together in a unit. This is multiplication, not just one, but multiple ones doing it. As I said before, people will bail. Some will stay, few will continue with evangelistic fervor, but God has planted in every church startup, new or existing church, in every church that's his church, he has planted in there potential multipliers. This is his will. Again, please read Acts 20, 17 through 38, or the entire context as well. The principles mentioned throughout this study are coming directly from Acts 20. The Apostle Paul at Ephesus was there about 3 years, and now they're a growing church. Here, Paul takes the church leadership and reminds them of the principles for building a church like the one they have there, reminding and exhorting them. These principles are involved in this passage, and they parallel with the 3 principles that Jesus used with the 12 apostles. So I've been kind of doing both at once here. The 3 are this: 1, fellowship. That's an intimate presence in their life. 2, a family dynamic, which was last week, building in those relationships and how to do that. And then today, a modeling example, that he modeled this before them, like a journeyman to an apprentice. So again, today we're going to look at a modeling example. This is the follow me principle of Jesus in Mark 3:14. It says, "And he ordained 12 that they should be with him, that he might send them forth to preach." And it's also the with me principle from Acts 4:9 that Paul used when he says, "Those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me do, and the God of peace shall be with you." Just as Jesus did, Paul set the pace. So do you and I, by the way. We set the pace. Having someone model a real-life example before us is the best way for a person to learn. Since he is training leaders, Paul took it as a journeyman does his apprentice. This is also how Jesus did his disciples. It's all about hands-on and watch me, and now you do it. Hands-on, watch me, and now you do it. Now that means you and I must be worth copying if they're going to be a copy. If someone's going to look at an example, then we've got to be that example. Now, I know that we're supposed to be pointing them to Jesus and not us, but we are there as his representatives. If they're going to learn, then they're going to have to learn from someone, and they need a tangible example that's already following Christ. Now, this is scary stuff, and I know that very well, and this is what usually halts a lot of spiritual leaders from even attempting discipleship, because people are watching you, and that's not fun at all. Much less, we're still humans, aren't we? And we know that. So there will be times of failure and getting in the flesh, and they're going to see that. They may bail. They may judge. They may use our name as evil, like Jesus said in Luke 6. Maybe. But they may learn from our example, both good and bad, and launch out to be more than we ever were. It reminds me of Elisha to Elijah. The second man was a double portion man. The key, I think, is to stay humble when we fail. When we fail, we must admit it. When there's a question, we remain reflective and obedient to the Lord and inquisitive as our disciple is, instead of trying to lord over the answer. I already know this stuff. Instead of being open and transparent, that's what we want from them. We have to model that. Otherwise, the one or ones to whom we are multiplying into will only see the good and not the bad. So they'll never know how to handle the bad if we're hiding that from them. Jesus modeled in front of his disciples everything in every environment, even his prayers. They saw the good and the bad of his life, how Jesus handled it in the moment in front of these people. Their representative wasn't, as we are, fallible. He was perfect. And you and I are not. But we serve a perfect God that can work in between that stuff. Jesus commanded his disciples to follow me in Matthew 4:19. He didn't just counsel them or advise them to do it. He commanded them to do it. It's written in imperative tense. We also are commanded to do the same. If we are to follow after Jesus, shouldn't we do as he did? To his disciples, he didn't just command them to listen, but to follow. He didn't just command them to walk along the way, but to watch and observe and take action. At the heart of leadership training in church is an example well set. We have to lead. We've been called to lead. We are servant leaders, yes, taking our orders from the Spirit within us according to truth. We're doulos, slaves for Christ. And they need to see that too and know that we're doing this together. There's not a lordship over each other. This example then needs to be a cutting edge of purity and consistency. It needs to be humble in mistakes and bold in truth. Every apprentice needs a journeyman. The thing is, the church you're at is full of apprentices. Find a journeyman. Go to your pastor and ask him to teach you. Hang out with him. Invite him over to the house or for fishing. Spend time with him. See how he really is, the real man. Maybe you're a spiritual leader yourself or pastor or something, and you're seeing or hearing this. Next week, I will share ideas on how to find potential multipliers. But the fact of the matter is, get an apprentice. Start training someone. And Acts 20, Paul's growing church leadership in Ephesus was the fruit of his life, lived in the Spirit's power at Ephesus among them, a modeling example. He reminds them consistently in the passage of his modeled example, his manner of life among them, in other words. Why? Well, he wanted to encourage them to continue growing and evangelizing. He modeled before them how to do those things. Now he is exhorting them to continue those things in the next generations. The imperative to follow is now in its third generation, at least, by Acts 20. They needed to continue the command of Christ to follow and to equip more followers, multiplication, or this cause of Christ dies out there. How? How did Paul do this? Well, let's look at Acts 20 for Paul's modeling example, and I've got just 3 points here. Number one, his example of humility and sacrifice. This is found in verses 19 and 24. D.L. Moody once said, "I know of nothing that speaks louder for Christ and Christianity than to see a man or woman giving up what they call their rights for others." Sacrifice of self was key in Paul's life. And for those who would multiply, people must see this example of humility and sacrifice in us. 2, Paul reminds them of his example of total commitment. It's found in verses 20, 24, 27, 35. In fact, the word all is used 10 times in this passage, this section alone. He modeled before them a life of all in. This brings back the law of diminished returns. If we give halfway, what will the next disciple give? I've been blessed by God to be trained and to be able to explore in the life of multipliers and been exposed to people that are teachers who were all in. Nothing halfway for God from those people. What example are we setting for our families, other disciples, new believers, other folks in our churches that are watching? I pray it's all in, because if it's not all in, then we're really being hypocritical. The third point here, he modeled before them an example of evangelism. This is in verses 20 and 21 and also 26 and 27. And we're really the entire context. It's the reason there's a church there. Someone evangelized, and they're still continuing to do so, and that's what Paul's been doing. D.L. Moody also said, nothing locks the lips like the life. A life not fully living for Christ cannot possibly represent him or specifically give the gospel out of sheer conviction of their own hypocrisy. Our life can be derailed quickly, but our life can derail our message even faster. Conversely, nothing enriches our words for Jesus like the backing of a consistent life modeled transparently before others. If we are secure in him, who cares what people think? In training, ask yourself this constantly. What do I want them to know? How am I going to teach them? And how will I know when they've got it? And then pray like crazy. God will answer those requests and direct you specifically in those directions. But if you don't know what questions to ask, then you don't have a heading, do you? So start there. What do I want them to know? How am I going to teach them? How will I know when they've got it? What do I want them to know? How am I going to teach them? And how will I know when they've got it? And start asking God to build that strategy within you and start seeking out the one that he would like you to start training. Next time, again, I plan to share how to find potential multipliers. And after that, where exactly do I start? I hope this helps. You should also check out my blog, www.chilloutandserve, that's chilloutandserve.com. Until next time.